them. I'm talking about the God of the Old Testament as he actually appears in the text of the Old Testament.
You regard anyone who reads the Bible literally as a fundamentalist, so please don't read the Bible as a fundamentalist.
40% of the American people read it as fundamentalists.
I agree, and I'm as terrified of that as you are.
I'm going to take a question. There's a student near the back there.
I've got a question for Professor Dawkins. I was just wondering if you see any sort of positive social contribution for religion whatsoever, whether in like an ideal world for you would have religion exist whatsoever.
I see enormous social value in the contributions of individual religious people. I do not see social value in religion itself. And I've said before that I take on board the Chief Rabbi's very interesting point that such social value as there may be comes from the sense of community that religion may build up, as opposed to the actual religious beliefs, which I do not think have any social value at all.
Could I just add to that? Because, you know, courtesy of the BBC, we saw a most stunning example of this a couple of weeks ago. That is a German Jewish refugee who came to this country in 1939, called Dr. Ludwig Guttmann, who was asked by this country in 1943 to open the first medical facility for paraplegics in Stoke Mandeville Hospital, and who came and saw how paraplegics were being treated. They could never lead a normal life. They were kept sedated and left to die. 80% of them. Life expectancy in those days, 3 months after being admitted. And here was a guy who, through centuries of ingrained Jewish belief, who knows perfectly well that every human being is in the image of God and therefore freedom, dignity, and hope are built into the human situation, did by extraordinary obstinacy against lots of medical objections, got them to sit up, to sit in wheelchairs, to play games, and created the Paralympics. Now, I don't think it was accidental that Ludwig Guttmann was a Jew from an Orthodox Jewish family. And I don't think it is accidental that faith carried him through the objection of all the nurses and the doctors who said, leave them to die. So I think faith does make a difference in where we see human dignity, where nature doesn't see human dignity at all.
The man in the dog collar.
The man in the dog collar, Richard Burridge, Dean of King's College London. I'd like to connect two of Professor Dawkins' statements together about he's looking forward to religionless future and it being child abuse to teach a child of 5 to be a person of a certain religion. And I don't know, Professor, forgive me, I don't know enough about your personal history, whether you've been blessed, and I will put in brackets by God, with children. But I wonder if you brought your children up in your religion. Because atheism and theism are both religions. We both look at the world, we look at the evidence, and I decide rationally on the basis of the evidence I see to believe in God, and you decide not to believe in God. And in your religionless future, there'll be no place for atheism either. What did you teach your children, and why is that different from what I teach my children?
I would teach any child to think for herself, to ask questions, to be critical. I would teach a child not what to think. I would teach a child to say, when anybody tells you anything, ask them what the evidence is. If the evidence is too difficult to understand for a child, ask them, is it the kind of thing which people know because of evidence? I did write an open letter to my daughter when she was 10, which was published. And in it I said all those things. I cautioned her that evidence was the only reason to believe things about the real world. And I cautioned her against 3 bad reasons to believe things, which were tradition, revelation, and authority. And the thing that's wrong with tradition and authority is that it's arbitrary which tradition you happen to come from. If you happen to be brought up in a Jewish tradition, or a Muslim tradition, or a Christian tradition, or a Hindu tradition, if you'd been... There is no atheist tradition. The atheist tradition is simply think for yourself, be critical.
No, you are not in a separate
Well,
place.
you've heard...
The same as everybody else.
Professor Dawkins has given his answer.
If you wish to label think for yourself a belief system, well, is it a coincidence?
No, please let Professor Dawkins answer.
Is it a coincidence that the vast majority of religious people have the same religion as their parents? If they're born in Afghanistan, they're Muslim. If they're born in...
I don't.
Well, good, I'm very glad to hear it.
Please, I'd like to be able to get a response from the panellists.
Are you of the same religion as your parents?
No.
In what respect different?
I'm a Christian.
And what are they?
They were non-believers.
Okay, well, fine, good for you. I mean, I congratulate you.
They told me to think for myself, I thought for myself, I decided to become a Christian. Thinking for yourself is something you and I both share.
Thank you. I don't think there's a disagreement there. I just wanted to get your response briefly, Chief Rabbi, because so I forgot the third one. There were three things you said you taught.
Revelation.
Revelation, tradition, and authority. And I thought you might have a bit of concern about that. The three things that you would teach a child not to.
You know, there's a very
believe
very famous story, goes back over 2,000 years. A student comes to a famous rabbi called Hillel and says, "Teach me the whole of Judaism, but without belief in authority." So Hillel says, "Okay, I'm going to teach you the alphabet, you know, ABC." So the guy goes home. Day one, he's learned ABC. The next day he comes for the second lesson, and Hillel says, "I'm going to teach you the alphabet." It goes CBA. And the man says, "Hang on, yesterday you said ABC, and now you say CBA. Which is it?" And Hillel says, "Well, you see, you've got to rely on me to learn even the alphabet. So I think you probably need to accept some authority before you can believe anything."
Thank you. We have time for one more. I'm going to take the young man in the middle here. Go ahead.
Thanks. I'm Tom Fawcett from Stockport Grammar School, and I have a question for Professor Dawkins, if that would be okay. I wouldn't claim that a belief in a deity is necessary to have morality. But what I would ask is, surely in the absence of a divine lawgiver, morality loses its intrinsic value. It's not written into the fabric of the universe. You cite the moral zeitgeist argument. Surely that deprives morality of any philosophical legitimacy. It's merely a human construct. Why should I be altruistic? Why should I care about anyone else when fundamentally morality has no further value?
Thank you.
This is a question I very often get. It's an extremely common point of view. I agree that it's very difficult to come to an absolute definition of what's moral and what is not. We are on our own without a God, and we have to get together, sit down together, and decide what kind of society do we want to live in. Do we want to live in a society where people steal, where people kill, where people don't pull their weight paying their taxes, doing that kind of thing? Do we want to live in the kind of society where everybody is out for themselves in a dog-eat-dog world? And we decide in conclave together that that's not the kind of world in which we want to live. It's difficult. There is no absolute reason why we should believe that's true. It's a moral decision which we take as individuals, and we take it collectively as a collection of individuals. If you want to get that sort of value system from religion, I want you to ask yourself, whereabouts in religion do you get it? Which religion do you get it from? They're all different. If you get it from the Judeo-Christian Islamic tradition, then I beg you, don't get it from your holy book, because it's, to repeat that opening line of chapter 2 of my book, the morality you will get from your holy book is hideous. Don't get it from your holy book. Don't get it from sucking up to your God. Don't get it from saying, "Oh, I'm terrified of going to hell, so I'd better be good." That's a very ignoble reason to be good. Instead, be good for good reasons. Be good for the reason that you've decided together with other people the society we want to live in, a decent, humane society, not one based on absolutism, not one based on holy books, and not one based on sucking up to looking over your shoulder to the divine spy camera in the sky.
Thank you. Final word to you, Chief Rabbi.
Well, you know, that was a super question, and actually that's my life story. I did not begin life wanting to be a rabbi. I went to university to study philosophy because I wanted to know, how shall I live? I studied it at two pretty good universities. My doctoral supervisor, the late Sir Bernard Williams, was pretty well recognized as the finest moral philosopher of his era. And I could not get an answer. In those days, I think philosophy is a lot better than it was, but in those days, if you ask somebody in moral philosophy what is right or wrong, they would say, no, you go and ask your vicar or your rabbi. I will tell you what the words right and wrong actually mean. And I dedicated my life to that. I mean, I taught moral philosophy. I've written moral philosophy. And at the end of the day, I could not get any coherent vision of morality. Of course, in the end, one of the great moral philosophers, Alistair MacIntyre, made the same point and brought me back into philosophy. But in the end, I had to leave philosophy and go to Judaism because only there did I have a concrete and compelling vision of the moral life. What is it? Love your neighbor as yourself. Love the stranger, for you were once strangers in the land of Egypt. Give to others, tzedakah, social justice, absolutely essential to Judaism, human dignity, human freedom, the power of hope, the power of forgiveness, the power of human dignity. All of those I found in this tradition, unbroken for 3,500 years, which I did not find in the moral philosophy in British or American universities of that time. And I think the questioner is right, because in the end of the day, the first lesson any philosophy student ever learns is facts are one thing, values are another. When all the facts are in, the question of values still remains. And we will never get that from science, which is brilliant at establishing facts, but cannot ordain values. And therefore, for that, we have to look ultimately, I think, at the ultimate itself, God himself, or at the very least, if you don't believe, at least accept the wisdom that has been honed and refined through 3,500 years and has brought freedom, dignity, and hope to the world.
Thank you, Chief Rabbi and Professor Richard Dawkins, and thank you for your questions.